Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How are you doing today, Nick?
Good. Looking forward to today's show very much. Yourself?
Same. I'm very happy to have with us for today's show Karen Bronson. She is a former middle school principal, and prior to that, she was a teacher of secondary English, and now she is a staff developer with SAANYS. So thank you very much for being here today, Karen.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So let's start off with a question that perhaps many of the listeners have. What is SAANYS exactly?
What is SAANYS? Well, first of all, the letters in the acronym stand for the School Administrators Association of New York State, and we are an organization that supports the work of approximately 7,000 school leaders in various roles across New York State, and we support their work in various ways. We do that through legal support, we do that through governmental liaison work, and we also do it through professional development. We also have lots of communications that we are very proud of that we think support the very challenging work of our administrative colleagues across New York State. So SAANYS is really a very multi-pronged supportive organization for the very challenging work that school leaders do in New York State today, especially over the past couple of years with all the challenges and changes that we've seen.
I definitely want to get into those changes for sure, but how did you become involved with SAANYS?
Well, actually, I became involved in the best possible way when I was an administrator at Shenendehowa Central Schools in Clifton Park, New York. After I was a teacher there for many years, I was a member of SAANYS. So for the years, approximately 6 years or so that I was an administrator at Shenendehowa, as a member of SAANYS, I really got to see firsthand what a great organization it was and how it really helped school administrators in many ways. So I had the opportunity to attend some meetings and to always kind of look forward to, especially the professional development materials that I would receive from SAANYS, issues of Vanguard, for example. I thought that the kind of practical approach that was offered in this particular publication that SAANYS did was really great and not exactly like any other professional publications that I received. So I was a member at SAANYS for those years. I then went downstate and I was a middle school principal in Westchester for 6 years. And at that time, I was a member of a different administrative organization. So for that time, I wasn't connected with SAANYS. I formally retired as an administrator from that downstate district in 2011. And really, I kind of retired for about an hour. And,
It sounds heavenly.
Yeah, it was nice. I kind of got my garage cleaned up a little bit, and then I said, well, okay, so that's done, so what am I going to do now? So I was very, very fortunate because I started to work immediately for Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, doing professional development for them in terms of everything that was happening that was new, very new, and as we know then, 4 years back, it was happening really fast, APPR, Common Core implementation, all of it. So Putnam Northern Westchester started to send me to the network team trainings that were just starting. So I had the opportunity to attend them right from the start and then come and kind of take that learning back to Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES and do things like their lead evaluator training and lots of other kinds of workshops. But then I wanted to really kind of move my life back upstate. My home is in Saratoga, even though I grew up in Westchester, and I had lived near Yonkers when I was down there for the 6 years. I love it down there, too.
You just need to be near a racetrack, apparently.
Yeah, you need to be near a racetrack.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty simple, So I came back upstate to Saratoga and started to do professional development for SAANYS, and then was offered the position of director maybe a year or so later, and I've been here for the last 3 years. So I just feel really fortunate to be part of a great organization like this.
And that's how I actually came to know Karen. It was through a staff development workshop that I attended, and she really is very well-spoken and very, very intelligent, and I thought that she would be a perfect guest for our show. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to be here with us today, Karen.
Well, thank you, Mark. And, I have to confess that, how some people have fear of public speaking? I have absolutely no fear of public speaking when it's in person. And I do have some fear of not so public speaking when it's over a device, whether that device is a phone or a computer. I don't know what it is, but when I'm speaking over a device as opposed to in person, I really feel very different and just a lot more kind of hung up than when I'm in person. So podcast is a new thing for me too. So thanks for your patience in getting me started with this. And, hopefully I'll kind of get warmed up a little bit, but it really does feel different to me.
Oh, well, it's no problem. Our anxiety levels using Skype are even higher than yours. So,
Oh, okay.
You're,
Well, that feels good.
you're already doing great. You got nothing to worry about.
Okay.
I,
Well, thank you.
I
You
do.
guys are great.
Just a quick question, though. I mean, you've mentioned so many different places throughout New York State. Do you notice that there is a difference in the needs and the educational cultures, whether you're upstate New York or, in Westchester County or even your work on Long Island? Or do you find that the administrators really have similar concerns?
Well, I think that there are many more commonalities than differences.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say everyone has been through the mill over the past couple of years, regardless of the part of the state that you hail from. And so everyone has been feeling all of those things in terms of feeling overwhelmed, feeling crushed by new responsibilities with regard to workload, observation processes, and all that. So I think there are lots of commonalities. Beyond that, I think there are differences as well, and I really do find it very interesting to kind of have the perspective around the state. I know that, for example, when the modules first came out, now that seems like a long time ago too, but when the modules were first kind of emerging and they were kind of rolling them out in the network team trainings, there was a great deal of interest in how do we implement the modules kind of sooner rather than later in certain parts of the state, in the western part of the state, for example, than there was in the eastern part of the state or downstate. I also think it's true that many of the districts that are more rural can feel a lot more isolated, and I really have gotten a good appreciation of what that must feel like to be the principal, K-12, and to have every responsibility within your school. I mean, as it extends to, doing a bus run when you have to, how that feels to be kind of isolated and not have a supportive team of colleagues around you all the time. I was fortunate. I always had my big team, especially at Shenandoah. And so I've gotten an appreciation for small, rather isolated rural schools around the state, and the kinds of needs that they have are different. And one thing that I think is the greatest need, and one that I've really gotten a lot of gratification around by just kind of making it happen, is not about me or training. It's about bringing colleagues together from those smaller isolated districts so that they have a place where they can collaborate, where they can commiserate, where they can share, and where they can kind of form their own personalized learning network, as it were. So those needs are different. They're very different in those smaller isolated districts than they are in bigger suburban districts, downstate districts. I think there's more of a call, a need, and an appreciation for professional development in parts of the state that do not get perhaps the same level of supportive stuff that bigger schools do from teams of colleagues more naturally.
So if you were going back to, let's not use the extreme example of that school in Western New York with the one principal who's in charge of K-12, but if you were
Yeah.
back in your middle school, and you were coming upon a brand new administrator who's now living in the world of Common Core and APPR, what kind of advice would you offer that person?
Well, I would say the first bit of advice, as it were, that I would give would be, we can't do this stuff alone anymore, period. So I think that making that new administrator feel welcome to the team and really doing things to help that new administrator get to know members of the administrative team so that those other team members could be collaborators in the work and also supportive partners. I think that would be pretty much the first piece of advice, like to become connected with colleagues, to really learn as much as he or she could about the culture of the district, the needs of the district. I think it's very true that you can be an administrator with lots of experience behind you, but when you step into a new district, you are stepping into a very new culture, and regardless of your past experience, you don't have experience in that culture. So I think that first year is really about building some relationships with your administrative team, certainly with your teachers, with your students, with your parents, and really learning a lot about the people and the culture in that district. I think that's the first priority for a new administrator.
Interesting.
Regardless of the times we're living in,
You know,
and
what-
especially in the time we're living in.
Yeah, you know, I really do find that very interesting because on one hand, I feel as if to go from being a teacher to being an administrator in the same school creates hurdles because now your colleagues are the people that you have to oversee and possibly, correct. But you're right. On the other hand, learning a whole new culture to go to a different school is so daunting of a challenge. So
It's very daunting. I'll tell you just briefly, my professional career, except for one wonderful year in 1974-75 on the island of Nantucket as an English teacher at Nantucket High School, and already I'm just gazing out the window wistfully wondering, like, why did I leave that? But anyway, why did I leave that? So anyway, for like the next 30 million years, I was really only in two districts, Shenendahowa, big, great suburban district up here in Clifton Park, New York, and Blind Brook Rye District, small, wonderful district in Westchester County. So I really got both of those experiences. At Shenendahowa, I became an administrator late after my own kids were kind of grown up and launched. And it was a very different feeling making that transition from teacher to administrator. But the good news around that is people knew me at Shen. They got me, and I got them. And I have to say, I was somebody that I think was liked and trusted by particularly teachers. I had been everything. I had worked every job in the restaurant through those years. I had been a union rep. I had been everything. And so when I did become that administrator, I think I brought a lot of kind of natural trust with me, although, don't get me wrong, it was very weird to me the first time I'd step into a faculty lunchroom and it would get quiet. I'm like, hey, you're my peeps. Like, what's with this, I mean, that kind of thing. But overall, that was what it was, and it was pretty good, kind of as good as it can be. When I went downstate, I had the administrative experience behind me, but it was a new culture, and it was also a small district. And big districts like Shenendahowa are, because they have to be, they're very heavy on process. I love process. I like forms. I like procedures. I like all those things a lot. And, a small district, couldn't be a better district, small, high-achieving district with a terrific team of teachers and administrators was just a very different feeling. Big to small was really different. And I really had to take my time in that environment not to think that because I have administrative experience that I'm going to know how things work here in a very different kind of environment, a very different size school. So that was a different transition. They're all challenging transitions.
So let me put you back into that school in Rye Brook, and now there's a reign of changes and new initiatives coming down from the state, and you're sensing very clearly that your teachers are feeling overwhelmed. So as the leader of that building, what kind of advice are you offering? What kind of steps are you taking to try to keep everybody on the ship?
Yeah, well, that's the challenge, because when I was there, word of Common Core and all of it was just emerging. And I remember I attended a meeting in Westchester about what was coming in Common Core with the person who was then the high school principal, and we were like, holy mackerel, this is big. My sense, and I learned a lot in that district, I learned a lot about what it means to be new in a place, not the person who's been there for a million years who people already trust, but what it means to be new, and how you have to slow down a little bit and really not try to promote a lot of change in a new environment. I learned that there. I didn't learn it at Shenendehowa, where I was kind of old hat there. But I think, so if I had stayed beyond 2011 in that district downstate when Common Core really hit, I think I really would have spent a lot of time, first of all, portraying myself as a learner along with teachers, because even to this day, everyone's a learner. Everything changes and emerges. It's such a dynamic environment that none of us is an expert. All of us are learning every day what we need to do to accommodate the tremendous level of change. So I think, first of all, kind of framing my my role that way would have been helpful. And then really, by the time I left, I really knew what a wonderful, and I knew it at the beginning, but I got to know the people who were the very talented teachers there. I would have really given them a lot of trust and responsibility in going out and seeking learning themselves, maybe being part of network teams as they were then, imperfect as they were, so that the teachers could come back and kind of help teach all of us. So I think that we're all learning this together would have been a primary, very important message, and really empowering the terrific teachers in that district to go out there and do some of this learning and come back and keep sharing with all of us. I think that would have been kind of my primary tactic.
Very
And
interesting.
being supportive, because everybody was hit at the same time, principals as well as teachers.
Right.
And I'll be very honest with you, now 4 years out, I look back on that period of time when everything was hitting, and I really think like the secondary teacher of English that I was for a long time. And boy, oh boy, if I had been teaching then, and just, I would have been a really good teacher on that team, just like the good teachers there, I would have been extremely ticked off, because I would have felt like, gee, they changed the rules of this whole game, and they're going to score me on it before I've even had a chance to learn the new rules and learn the new approach. That would have really upset me as that good teacher. So I really have I think an understanding of how that felt, because as we know, combining the evaluation piece, the accountability, the scoring, the APPR, at the same time that this big new thing called Common Core was rolling out, that was really, really damaging, to people. So I think managing that anxiety would have been a primary focus of mine too.
I think you've encapsulated a lot of the frustration felt by teachers and supervisors across the entire state.
Yeah, I'll tell you, whenever I do any kind of professional development, my lens is really the lens of, if I was still that middle school principal or assistant principal or dean that I was, what would I need now? What would I feel now? What would really be helpful to me? And my other lens is, particularly when I'm working with teachers or teams of teachers and administrators, if I was still that 8th, 9th, 10th grade English teacher, what would I be feeling now? What would I need now? What would be helpful to me now? That's the lens. And I think that it's really those two roles that help me kind of shape professional development, where I see the support as being as important as the information.
Well, I do want to transition into your role at SAANYS, and it reminds me of a joke. So there's a tour of
Go for it.
there's a tour of heaven,
Yeah.
and someone they stop the bus and they see all these firefighters running around, and they're like, oh, these are the firefighters. And then they go to the next section and they see a bunch of policemen running around. They're like, oh, these are the policemen. And then they run to, or they take the bus into the next area, and it's completely desolate. And the guide says, this is where the teachers are. So the person on the bus says, well, where are they? They said, well, they're in hell. They're like, why? What's wrong? And says, well, it's Staff Development Day. So,
Gee, thanks a lot, Mark.
pardon the
Yeah.
bad joke,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's my question. Why does professional development or staff development get such a bad rap? Because I attended your session and I learned a tremendous amount and I thought it was very worthwhile. But when you mention staff development or professional development to the average teacher, after the eye rolling stops, you get a vibe that they're just not into it. So why do you think it gets such a bad rap?
Well, I often kind of go back to my own experience as that teacher or principal, and I was a real eye roller. And to me, in one of the districts, the big district initiative for about 3 years was early on, right? Right when it was kind of invented, was differentiated instruction. Okay, before APPR, before Common Core, before any of that, and I would attend those staff development workshops and just sit there wondering how the heck this talking head person, wonderful person, but talk, talk, talk in front of the room, had any understanding of what the reality of differentiated instruction was going to mean in a classroom for real teachers. I was very focused on, okay, so how are we really going to accomplish this? Like, let's get to that. And I think that staff development death is kind of the cliched, unappealing, cartoonish vision of the expert talking head up in front of the room and the participants distracted, anxious, and most of all, disconnected to the learning that's taking place, feeling, I just want to get this over with. I need to get the PD hours from this. This doesn't relate to what I do. I'm going to sit here and put up with this for 3 hours, and I'm going to walk out, and my life in room 52 is going to be exactly the same.
Right, right.
That kind of thing, that's PD death. And I will tell you that one of my pet peeves is being a speaker in an auditorium to professional staff and having those folks come into a darkened auditorium, sit toward the back with the lights dimmed. All the seats will be kind of empty up front, and you're up there talking. And I think that every detail of professional development, down to how the room is lit, how the chairs are arranged, how much interaction there is, and how you use the expertise in the room to get away from that talking head expert that we just want to be over. I think that's one reason for PD death. I think the other reason is that there can be great workshops, and I've gone to tons of great workshops through my life, even in the old days. I mean, we went to a lot of great workshops, but what would happen is we go to those workshops and we get all fired up. I went to National Council of Teacher of English conferences, and boy, the best workshops, fired up with some colleagues. And then we come back to our real life in school the following Monday. We're back from Atlanta, and it's like all of that goes out of our head, and we're here, with our regular kids with their regular issues, and there's no follow-up. Like, that was great, but it was a drive-by. So I think that's another thing. I mean, something can just be wanting, like a kind of dull talking head, this doesn't apply to me, or something can be great, and it's just a drive-by, and it's great, but then it's gone, she's gone, and, what was that all about? So I think PD is really changing, and that's a good thing.
Well, as the teacher in the group here, I think I'm probably the one we're being targeted for, not enjoying staff development day. I just,
Yeah.
No, it's
I
across the board. It's across the
oh
board.
no, I'm fascinated by your observations and your insight about staff development, and I just think my sympathy lies with the fact that I just don't think enough time is available to first prepare staff development and then to execute it. I think too often
Yes.
it's just tried to, we try to fit it in, and I really think to be the most effective, you need to give people time to prepare, and you need to have ample time to allow the teachers to do what you want them to do. So
Very true.
yeah, I've always felt that the role of the principal today, I don't know if there's a more challenging, demanding, pressurized job. I feel as if I look at our principals and they're just They're running around from one thing to the next. I think a lot of times teachers don't understand that, teachers look at their concern or their issue as the only thing that's on their mind when they go to a principal. They don't realize that there are 10, 15, 20 other things that the principal's dealing with on that same moment. If, as an administrator, if you could have one situation in your role that you could just magically fix, whether it's having the most cooperative staff or whether it's having the more people on your administrative team, or whether it's you could just get rid of all the regulations, what would you, if you had your one wish, what would it be to make that job a little bit easier?
Honestly, that's a great question. My one wish would be that we turn off all the noise around the politics, the new regs, and all of it, and that we focus on the one pure thing that really motivated all of us to be educators to begin with, which is those students. We love those students. We love our, as teachers, we love our content. My one wish would be that we really focus on that and think about how we're going to really rethink everything to bring schools truly into the 21st century that our students are going to experience once they walk across that stage and graduate. I really think what I would wish for is a real openness to innovation without the threat of evaluation behind it. I would wish for an environment where trying new things and not expecting them to work perfectly was really valued, where fear of the accountability, evaluation, and testing pieces didn't rule the day, where teachers really started to learn from their greatest resource, which is one another, and where the silos, the big, tall silos that have really defined schools for a long time, silos of classrooms, silos of departments, of offices, of school buildings, of grade levels, where those silos really started to be deconstructed in the interest of students. That's really what I would wish for, a real openness to looking at every aspect of school as we know it and really understanding that the world has changed and is changing every day. And schools really need to change along with it to provide the experience that our students need. And then having that be our focus and that be our lens rather than kind of the unfortunate things around testing and measuring and metrics that have become the unfortunate focus of the time that we're in right now. So that's pretty much top of my wish list.
That's really wonderfully said. And since you're at SAANYS and you're up there in the Albany area, does SAANYS hold any sway with the State Department of Education?
I think SAANYS is the best organization in terms of the strength that we have here of our governmental liaisons and our other kind of connections with state ed. This is really not my department per se, but I get to have a bird's eye view of the very, very productive and close connections that that SAANYS has in terms of its conversations at the state level through many, many of our resources and pathways and people. So SAANYS really is, I think, so well situated to provide, once again, that real spectrum of services and being a vocal advocate for school leaders and for schools really is something that SAANYS excels in because of the nature of its broad strength and support around the state.
May I be so bold as to ask you to switch divisions and get to the division that has the ear of the governor, because you have a wonderful way of illuminating all of the issues and problems and concerns, and I think you'd be a wonderful advocate and voice for the voiceless throughout the state who have all these concerns that you've wonderfully stated.
Well, thanks, Mark. But all I really bring to this, what I do bring to this is, I think, um, a true kind of gut understanding of what it means to be a teacher, because I did it for so long and I loved it, and what it means to be a school leader, because I did it for so long and I loved it. And I think it's just that perspective of what it's really like to be that, especially now. That's really, I think, what I bring to this. It really is not the vantage point of an expert by any means. It's the vantage point of experience, which I think is just a very neglected voice right now in terms of the state level and the realities of some of the changes and how they've really affected the people in our schools and therefore our students. So thanks for that.
You're welcome, and thank you very much
You are very welcome.
for
My
taking the
pleasure.
time to join us today on the podcast. And we
Thank you.
appreciate all of your insight, and really thank you for sharing. If you would like to follow us on the web, you can find us at stateofedpodcast.com. If you have any questions or you'd like to suggest a topic, it's ask@stateofedpodcast.com. You can find us in the iTunes store, and please subscribe to us there. That's, of course, State of Ed Podcast, and we're in the podcast section of the iTunes store. If you want to tweet, you can find us at SOE Podcast.
It's a pleasure. And Nick, thanks so much. Hope we get to meet someday.
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again.
All righty. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye-bye.